Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom. All praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth and citations to the sincere Akim and Aquatham and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai, and back in here with another quick and Lord's will always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of wanted to go through a little bit more in regards to character and, a trait, essentially, practicing the mindset of, having and giving alms and charity, right? And, we always talk about how through our apostles and elders on down, go on in regards to the mindset of how the money that we have is not real money, which is true. It's not backed by anything, but you being blessed with the, I guess, the pseudo money, you can call it. You can still use the carnal riches to acquire and have a storehouse of spiritual riches, right? So I guess I'm just gonna go into when you're doing good, knowing who you do is to. So that's pretty much the title, right? And because when we don't want to, essentially, it's about also seizing the opportunities to actually, do good, amongst ourselves, right? So when we are in the midst of Jacob's trouble, and there is famine, there is when you scriptures talk about how the love of many shall wax cold, there shall be sedition among men, all these, in the midst of all these different how do you call those things? I guess you can call it tribulation. The Lord pretty much remembering us for those deeds that we did while we actually had it, right? So I guess I'll start off. I was reading Sirach 12, but I guess I was I guess I'll just start off there, right? And this is just pretty much going into a sentiment of character, because in the world we never really had that mindset of practicing these these godly traits amongst ourselves. Like, this is part of our culture, is to actually be like this amongst another, right? As a matter of fact, hold on, before I go there, since I mentioned tribulation, this is, where is it? Okay, this is Jeremiah 30, verse 7, and it says, Alas, for this day is great, that is none like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it, right? So we're going to go through situations, because we see where the world is going. We see where, the elites, their mindset is to, put a grain of rice, in individuals pursuant to Revelation 13, right? We see they want to establish essentially their enterprise, their wicked enterprise to control the people, to, basically for you people, especially you Israelites, to have nothing and for you to be happy about it, right? So being armed with that type of information, what are some of the things we can do? Because the scriptures talk about putting on, therefore, the elect of the Most High, right? It's like you put it on like a t-shirt, and it comes with certain character traits, right? Because the scriptures also say that riches profit not in a day of wrath, but righteousness can, virtues and whatnot, can deliver from death, right? So having some substance can be very, very useful, because scriptures do say also it's also a defense, right? So if you use it right, you can have it to be able to store up rainy day funds, so the Lord can be able to remember those things Yahweh Shai can remember us, especially in those days when, that rainy day comes, right? Because the way when you see their enterprises to going is to essentially to be as a platform where it's digital, where cash is essentially obsolete, so um so let me go to, this is kind of what inspired the lesson, to be honest with you. Ecclesiasticus 12, I'll start off verse 1, and here it says, um, when thou wilt do good, know to whom thou doest it, and so shalt thou be thanked for thy benefits. Do good to the godly man, and thou shalt find a recompense, if not from him, yet from the Most High Yahweh, Bashmal Shai, right? So, that trait, that character, I don't want to say it's not a flaw, but it's having that mindset of doing good to, another brother, or a godly man, having that mindset, applying that mindset, because scriptures do say also faith without works is dead, right? Applying that, the Lord can pretty much, to keep a tally of those things, those good deeds, where you did something good for another, right? And this is all really, about character too, because when you think about it, when you compare that sort of mindset towards, doing good to a godly man versus the way Jake doesn't have that mindset of essentially, especially in Babylon, because their minds have been contaminated with so-called black culture, where it has programmed them, it has seduced them into behaving in the same way Esau behaves towards his own people. That essentially dog eat dog, that very individualist mindset, that type of mindset where, I'm gonna screw you over just so I can get on top of you. Jake has essentially adopted that same mentality as well, and you hear it all throughout their music, because there is no regard for the way they actually can treat each other, right? And Yahweh Shai even said it, he simplified it into, these two laws, love the Lord with all thy heart and soul, with all thy mind, and to love thy brother as thyself, to roughly paraphrase, right? Those two hang the law and the prophets, right? So, coming back to our nationality, it comes with proper cultivation. And this is a huge aspect of the pie that Jake, our people, the Israelites, are essentially lacking in. When people talk about so-called black fatigue, that's a very common thing within the internet world at the moment. Our even our people complain about it, as well as now you have, even heathens are complaining about our people's lewd behavior. It shows that our people have they lack decorum and etiquette, right? Because they're properly uncultivated, right? It shows that they're not branches that have been trimmed, they're not being taken care of, the soil is lacking nutrients, it's lacking water, all these different areas. Like when you think about a plant, Jake looks like a plant that's withering and dying, has thorns. There are unclean unclean bugs, chewing on it. It has a bunch of holes in the leaves. You know what I'm saying? That's how our people look, because essentially they've become a degenerate plant of a strange vine, because the Lord created us to be a noble vine. And these are the sorts of character and flaws, not, sorry, I didn't mean to say the word flaws. These are the sorts of character traits that do make us a lot more noble as a people, right? Because the other nations are supposed to look at us and understand that, okay, this is the standard of how you ought to conduct yourselves, right? So, um, okay, let me go to, because I mentioned quite a couple things here. I kind of wanted to read this quick story. So just keep that precept in mind in regards to doing good to the godly man, right? So just bear with me. So a lot of this is just really about character, right? So I want to start here, and I want to read this story. So this is 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 2. And it says, now, I want to read it in the AMP. So it says, now there was a man in Maon whose business and possessions were in Carmel. And the man was very rich. And he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was intelligent, beautiful, and in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings, for he was a Calebite. All right, so it says he was the house of Caleb in the KJV. So it says, David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men and said to the young men, go up to Carmel and go to Nabal and greet him in my name. And this is what you shall say, have a long life, peace be to you, and peace to your house, and peace to all that you have. Now I have heard that you have shearers, your shepherds have heard with us, and have not harmed them. Have been with us, and we have not harmed them. Now, nor were they missing anything all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men have find favor in your sight and be well treated, for we have come on a good festive day. Please give whatever you find at hand to your servants and to your son of David. So essentially, David sends these men to pass on a message, right? And pass on a message of peace. We used to did some work for you. Please be able to please help us out. Because we're kind of like in a time of need, right? So go back in the story. David pretty much is he's being persecuted, right? By Saul's tripping. He's behaving very, very carnal, right? So this is Nabal's response. So take this in, and it says in verse 9, it says, and when David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in the name of David. Then they waited. But Nabal answered David's servants and said, who is David? Who is this son of Jesse? There are many servants today, each of whom is breaking away from his master. So keep in mind, this is after David, slays Goliath, right? So after that, he started to gain a little bit of reputation, fame, notoriety. Excuse me. So it says, but Nabal answered and said, hold on. Verse 11, it says, so should I take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered from my shearers and give it to men when I do not know where they are from? So David's young men made back their way and returned and came and told him everything that was said. And David said to his men, each man put on your sword. So each man put on his sword. David also put on his sword. And about 400 men went up behind David, while 200 stayed back with the provisions and supplies, right? So pretty much what happens now, David, he's in a his now he's in warlike mode at this point, right? And you saw the way Nabal had responded to the young men um, that David had sent out. So going back to the precept I brought up earlier, you know, instead of helping David and his men, him having all that substance, because it's not like it was it's not like it was like a little bit of substance. This man has a lot of substance, and it shows you two things. It shows you the kind of character that Nabal has. Nabal has the character of the type of stinginess where he holds on to the substance that he has because he doesn't want to help, quote unquote, help this young man, right? He's not being spiritual, and the scriptures say that a carnal man, the natural man, I'm sorry, can't receive the things of the spirit because he doesn't have the spiritual discernment to be able to realize what's actually taking place in front of him, right? A spiritual man will be able to discern this. This is he wasn't king at the time, but the point really is that this is your own kin. He's in a position where he needs help. He's done work for you, so already he has a decent reputation. It wasn't like some Pookie and Ray Ray that's selling TVs on the side of Wall Street, right? This is a decent type of person because if there's anything in the ancient world, a good name had a good reputation. There was a show I used to watch back in the day called Game of Thrones, and there's a family on the show. For brothers who've seen it, his name was Tyrion Lannister. He was the what do you call those people? He was like the dwarf character, right? And he always used to have this saying, like, a Lannister always pays his debts, right? And it shows you there's also power in a name, right? Now, the second point I also want to touch on is the fact that not only did Nabal not was able to see what was taking place in front of him, he wasn't walking in the spirit, right? But also, going back to the precept I brought up earlier, it shows that he didn't take the opportunity to do good to the godly man. Going back to the title of the lesson, right? Character. This is one of the things that he was missing. And it also shows another side of it also. Think about this. Because a lot of our people have a lot of substance, kind of like this Nabal character. And they're going to use that substance, quote unquote, to think they're being a good case, right? To get them out of situations in the midst of Jacob's trouble where they see things, going on, right? So on and so forth, right? They're going to think that, okay, their money can save them, right? Thinking on a grander scale, like you can think on a micro scale, but you can even take it on a grander scale because a lot of our people, especially the people who have a lot of substance in this world, think themselves to be in a good case because they have a little bit of chump change in the in the bank, right? And when there's anything that's been happening a lot lately is the fact that a lot of these banks have been having I don't want to say blackouts, but like not like failures within their system, like glitches in their system. People can't access their money and so on and so forth. That's been a reoccurring problem that happened with a bank. I think it was Citibank. That happened this year, and I remember it happened with Bank of America I think it was last summer, if I'm not mistaken. But the point is that a lot of our people still have a lot of that substance, and they still, it shows that their mentality is far gone. They still have the mentality of a nigga. Let me go to, hold on. Let me read this in 2nd Ezra. 1 second. Okay, this is 2nd Ezra 9 and 9, and it says, Then shall be they be in pitiful case, which now have abused my ways, and they that have cast them away despitefully shall dwell in torments. For such as in their life have received benefits and have not known me, and they that have loathed my law, and the loathe is a strong, it's essentially like a strong dislike, a disregard, right? And a lot of our people have received a lot of benefits when you think about their riches, so to speak. Um, Whether it's like music careers and the things that that the thing you have to, and that's another thing also, they have to do shady behavior to get a lot of those riches and substance, sacrifice family members, or they've had to sacrifice their manhood. That's another thing also, right? Those kind of things to get a little bit of benefits, right? So now you're just in a, now you're in, you were in debt before you did those things. Now you're in more debt after doing those things, right? So what does it say here? It says, and when a place of repentance was opened unto them, understood not, but despised it, the same must know it after death by pain, right? So a lot of our people, they're going to have to perish, because they have, the Lord has stretched out his hand, and shown his compassion, pursuing the 2nd Chronicles, right? But, they don't want anything to do with, coming and kindling a relationship with Yahweh Bashim Shai, right? Okay, let me go back to the story and I'll just finish it up. I don't want to make it too long, but I pray, this lesson is edifying, right? So okay, I'll jump down to verse 18, and it says, so this is where his wife intervenes. Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves of bread, 2 jugs of wine, 5 sheep already prepared for roasting, 5 measures of roasted grain, and 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on donkeys. And she said to the young man's servants, Go on ahead of me. Behold, I am coming after you. I'm sorry, excuse me. But she did not tell her husband Nabal, right? So essentially, she eventually intervenes and performs that good deed, right? Performs that righteous deed, right? So, the Heavenly Father's, that is a good work that she performed here, right? As opposed to Nabal, and he missed that opportunity to actually do good, to the godly man, right? So it shows you, character. It shows you that, that a lot of our people who might have a lot of substance, they're essentially, they might have, their riches are on heavenly focused on the outside, but their substance, they don't have a substance, spiritual substance on the inside. They're broke, they're lacking, right? So let me just hit this right here. Just bear with me on this. Okay, this is Sirach chapter 29, verse 11 in the GNT. And it says, Use your wealth as the Most High Yahweh Bashim Shai has commanded. This will do you more good than keeping your money for yourself, right? And that shows exactly what Nabal did. He kept it for himself. He didn't actually have the mindset of trying to help his fellow kin, especially in a time of trouble. Verse 12, and it says, count among your treasures the fact that you give to the poor. It will save you from all kinds of trouble, right? So this is the kind of mindset, we can adopt as well for ourselves, you know, because we want to be remembered and covered, in the midst of Jacob's trouble, because we don't have any, we're worms, we're sheep in the midst of wolves, right? So who do we can rely on? We need a divine intervention in those times. Pretty much kind of like the widow that fed the what's his name, Elijah, and gave him place to eat. Sorry, he gave him food to eat, and there was a place, if I'm not mistaken, that he stayed at, right? But the point is, and that was in the midst of famine. That's another thing also during the time of the reign of King Ahab, right? So those kinds of things, the Lord can create and have a hedge around us, in those times of trouble, because those times, are, we're going to be destitute. And when I say destitute, I mean like carnal stuff, right? Money, physical money and all that kind of stuff. But taking advantage of those opportunities to actually do good, those can earn us spiritual money in heaven, right? And those are things, and that kind of money is real. It's not, it doesn't, it's not rusting. It's not, it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not going to devalue or debase, kind of like Nero when he began to debase the currency, the denarius, in the time of the Roman Empire. That's eternal riches, and Esau can't touch that. So, I guess I'll just leave it there. But I sincerely hope, pray this lesson was edifying. I'd just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth. Till next time, I say, Shalom.